All right, so 2018 is slowly but surely winding down. We're just about to embark on what I would consider formal holiday season. It's early in Thanksgiving week. I'm sitting with David Newkirk, founder of Ethos Consulting. Brilliant mind, amazing guy, amazing strategy consultant, really smart. And we've been spending some time together today, talking about our businesses and talking about things we need to do as we wind down 2018 and step into 2019. We wanted to jump on and share some of our takeaways from today's conversation about what you can do. What are things you can do for your career, your job, even if you work for a big company, a mid-sized company, and certainly if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner. What do you want to be cognizant of as you head into 2019? And by the way, it doesn't have to be my next big program, my next big money maker, my next big thing I'm going to add that I can charge people for. As we're going to break down in a second here, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. So we've been talking about a lot of that, and we want to share it with you. And lastly, before I bring David in here, just because it's the holiday season doesn't mean you need to table things or wait till January 2nd or 3rd. There are things in small windows of time you can be doing every day, or maybe not Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day, but pretty much every day for the next 6 weeks that are going to help prepare you for 2019, for an amazing 2019. So if you're in that space already, or if you need a little nudge, follow along with us for the next few minutes, because this will help you. So, are you excited about the next 6 weeks? And I know you have a family, and we're all busy. We all have a lot going on. But let's start with that. What's your mindset as you head in? Think about your business and other people that you coach and help and consult for. What's your mindset heading into the holidays as a business owner?
Well, it's interesting because I'm a big believer in that we get conditioned to asking ourselves the common questions, and we sometimes have a hard time answering it. Like, what do I want to accomplish next year? It's a big question. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out where do I start answering that, and what do I do? What I like to say is clarity comes when you ask what I call the contra question. So it's instead of asking what do I need to do next year or what do I need to do the next 6 weeks, you ask yourself, in the absence of not doing X, what ends up happening? So what is the negative result that would occur if I don't look at making improvements to my business, if I don't look at making improvements to my career, if I don't spend time looking at this, what could happen? And what surfaces is, I'm at risk of my job because they've been doing layoffs, or my business always doesn't have the best sales in the first quarter, but I tend to just cruise through it and say, I'll wait the second quarter because that's when things get better. So when you look at that, you start to ask the opposite question. You start to see the things that don't get addressed that put you at risk.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you think it's so I know on the surface it's hard to ask. I think it's hard to ask that question.
Yes.
Because we're taking our place, not only our mind but our heart, like how we feel inside emotionally to, oh my gosh, okay, so does that mean I'm irrelevant in 6 months? Or if I'm not developing my skills, I'm going to be outsourced or lose my job? Or am I good enough to own my own business? Like, do you think people struggle? I'm kind of teeing up a very obvious question, but people struggle going into that hard place of asking themselves that question?
They do, because they're already fearful of the answer that they don't want to face should they go through the exercise. It's sort of like predestined. I know what the answer is going to be, but I don't want to have to deal with that because it's easier to just aspire and hope everything falls into place. And a lot of times, if you already know that that's a difficult answer that you just don't want to face, then you already know what the outcome is going to be.
But if you know, so sorry to interrupt, but say you write down 2 or 3 things that could happen if I don't take this action, and maybe it spurs on an additional thought and be like, and by the way, I've learned this not only as a coach, but with the coaches that have helped me and all the work that I've done the last 3 years. Often the story we have in our head, it's never as bad as we make it seem. Once we write it down and actually play it out, everybody thinks if they start a business, oh my gosh, I'm going to go broke, I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be on the street, I'm going to be sleeping on floors. Maybe it's played out that way for some people at times, but even if it did, what's the worst thing that can happen? Does that align with what you're saying?
Absolutely. We don't know what the future is, but what we do know is if we think of what a possible outcome is, we have all the time now to change it. to make that outcome not viable, not make that. So for example, let's use career and then business. In a career, if you think potentially that you could be at risk, the fact that you're thinking about it means you can game plan. Maybe I need to strengthen my relationship with my boss. You know, I need to have a conversation and say, can I meet with you every 2 weeks just to touch base for 5 minutes? Just because that type of interaction, which you don't even have on a regular basis, will accomplish and make you feel less at risk. They'll start sharing more information they've never shared before. You're like, things are going well. I didn't realize that. Or you're in your business and you see Q1, I just never need to. But what if you look at why Q1 is tough for your business as an entrepreneur? Maybe it's like, you know what? Hey, maybe I need to spend more time on social media just doing a personal video for my business every 2 weeks. That takes me 10 minutes every 2 weeks to do. Not a big deal, but maybe that's going to help me. So there's things that don't have to be monumental, big tasks and big headaches and big, huge things to do. You can pick these little things, make them easy and doable, and it can change the outcome.
Strategy. David Newkirk, if you have a business, for sure, I mean, you can strategize around your career as well. In fact, as David's pointing out, you should be. We all need to. If you need any guidance on strategy, this is a gentleman to speak with. So let's segue a little bit, but it's still related to, you know, we're in 2019. I said at the beginning of the video, you and I have been talking about things we're doing for our businesses. We don't necessarily need to share the what, but within a matter of moments of talking with you about one of my programs, you then laid out for me, you proceeded to lay out to me another option. I don't know if I'll do it or not, but where I can add another component of my program to people in a different way. What is it about the work that you do and the way your mind works so that when you engage with a client or a potential client, that you're able to envision and just come up with different options? And this is relevant to you because whether you can think about these things yourself or you engage somebody like David, we need to always be considering other options, right? Just like David said, consider the worst case scenario. What is it about your head that gets you in a place where you can come up with ideas like that?
You know, that's an easy question, but a tough one to answer. I would say, you know, just the diversity of work. So, you know, from a personal perspective, I've had the luxury of having every position in an organization that you can think of. And so being able to understand the mindset of so many different perspectives and being in all different lines of business and understanding that, it just built a wealth of knowledge and perspective. But by constantly having conversations with people, it keeps me relevant. And by constantly working with clients, I'm learning from them just from information and from perspective. But what it's allowed me to do is I'm constantly calling on different perspectives and angles because of the diversity of experience, where a lot of people tend to have one or two areas they tend to focus and they're used to that perspective, that lens. So I can very quickly toss that perspective or that issue around and give you 4 or 5 different lenses to look through and say, have you considered X, Y, or Z? And what's really interesting is it's exciting because people have aha moments. The common comment is, I haven't thought of that. I really got to think about that. And so it's just very helpful to be able to know that you can share different lenses of the same issue, but know that it's from many different perspectives over many years, and it gives people something to think about, like a new toy. It's unwrapped, and they think about all the things they can do with it.
Yeah, I like it. So if you're out there as a business owner and entrepreneur, and just suggestion, a tangible takeaway for folks out there is talk with, listen to people. That helps generate ideas. Well, first of all, it gives you perspective. You probably learned something you may not have known before, and then it helps generate more ideas. Okay, let's wind down or spend the last couple of moments on this. Somebody out there is watching this who has a business, who is a new entrepreneur, maybe they've been involved for a couple of years now, and they're heading into the holiday season stressed. They're like, okay, my business is doing all right. I'm okay, but I had higher goals, or I know I could do more. What can I do differently in 2019? What's something I need to do to grow, whether it's revenue, client size, program, the litany of things or offerings that I have to bring to the world. What's something that you would, if somebody was sitting with you 6 weeks before 2019, that you would start with if that person came to you stressed out like that?
It's interesting. stress manifests itself in many different ways, but what it does do is it tends to create fear and irrational thinking, and those are always the bad way to make decisions about your business. So it's really important that you do move through those, have those conversations, because you want to be level set with your thinking so you make the best decisions for your business. So you need to move out of that cycle if you're there. Just really important. But the thing is, be honest.
I'm sorry. Is it because emotion, if we're stressed or anxiety is high, emotion creeps into our decision making, and we don't necessarily want to make decisions based on or too much based on emotion? Is that part of what you're thinking?
Sort of. What happens is when you're in that emotional state, usually what happens is negative thoughts creep in, which creates fear of the outcomes you don't want. So when you have fear, you try to think through how to get rid of the fear to make the outcomes you're thinking not happen. And so what happens is it's based on an emotional relief of a decision versus based on fundamentals of the business. And so you want to make sure that you're focusing on the fundamentals of the business, which then translates to your question, a self-assessment. What do I do well as a business owner? What don't I do well? And from what I don't do well, what do I either need to improve or get external support to fill the gap so the business thrives on those aspects? And a do-it-yourselfer on everything is really hard to do.
So when you say that, and it's something that I've learned formally a year and a half into my business, that we can't do it all. You know, and do you see this a lot with people where, do you think it's a common mistake that people take on, and we read a lot about this, but where people try to take on too much?
Yeah, and I think the statistics bear itself out, right? Small Business Association is any business under 500 employees, but 50% of those businesses have less than 20 employees, and lots of those are entrepreneurs. And what that really means is that 50% of them fail within the first 4 years. Why? Because they're do-it-yourselfers, where they'd rather not look at the expense of getting help, and they're like, I'll read, I'll look at resources, I'll do it myself. 6 months go by, they're about 20% proficient on something they needed help with, and that's not enough to make a difference or impact to the business to solve what was needed. Right. So now you've lost 6 months. You're not any better off in that skill or that knowledge when you could have solved it in the first 30 days.
How do you, and I know I run across this so much as a career coach where, for somebody who's never used a coach and has been moderately engaged in personal development in their life, it's hard, and you and I have talked about this many times, it's hard to qualify and quantify, like, okay, enroll with me, hire me, and here's what you're going to get. I mean, it's a challenge.
It is.
What do you do when you come across as a strategy consultant where somebody's saying, okay, sounds great, I have this business, it sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable and can help me out, but what am I going to get after 6 months of working with you? And it's not like you need to share with this audience, well, here's exactly what you get, right. But what's the mindset and approach and the seed you want to plant? Because there may be somebody who sees this video who says, I know I need some help, but boy, what am I getting if I lay out X amount of dollars?
Yeah, what you want to be able to know is that, money shouldn't be the issue. Money can always be used and as needed. It's rationalized most of the time. It's usually available. It can be tougher at times, granted, I don't discount that. But what it comes down to is, do you understand the destination of the end place you will be at the end of all that work? Where it's tangible, you understand it, and you know how it's significantly better than where you were. I always say the biggest challenge is, it's inertia, and I call it marginal indifference. Marginal indifference is, I can spend the money and I can spend 6 months with somebody, but if I'm only marginally better than where I was, that's not enough of an improvement to justify spending the money. So you really have to feel like if you're promoting your services or you're buying, you have to feel like there's a big enough gap of where you are to where you'll be that you know that it's worth it.
That makes sense. And it gives somebody something to work off of when they're having these conversations. And then they go and think about it themselves, too.
Absolutely.
All right. So, again, 2019, it's not just what are you going to do January 2nd, it's what are you doing every day between now and then to get ready, along with inventory in your 2018, asking yourself, what do you need to change, what do you need to get better, what bad experiences have I had that I know I don't want to, I mean, listen, we learn from them all, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm not even, I've kind of come around, and thankfully I do acknowledge many of the influencers that I listen to, I've come around to not falling into the trap so much of saying, fail fast or failures. No, you know what? It's just an experience. Mm-hmm. It worked out the way it did. It may not have generated X, Y, or Z like I hoped, but I'm just going to learn from it. So think about those moments, right?
Absolutely. Failure is a learning, which makes it not a failure, because there's that emotional feeling tied to it versus the intellectual aspect, which means there's a lot to be learned, which actually helps you get to your goal line. So if you can separate the feeling of failure from the feeling of understanding what value there was in learning from it, you'll get that much closer to success.
2 small calls to action to wind this up. Number 1, look up David Newkirk on LinkedIn, Ethos Consulting, Newkirk, and we have no formal attachment. I just am a big believer in the work this guy does. Secondly, ask yourself, challenge yourself, what am I doing between now and December 31st? That's all I'm going to say. What am I doing for my job, my career, or my business? What am I doing that's going to help me be better in 2019? I'm not waiting till January 2nd. All right? We'll see you all again soon. Thanks, David.